Meeting of March 12th, 2018. We're going to do three things. Two of these things we're going to do in an open session. First of all, and we have to do these are housekeeping things that we have to do before we go forward or anything. First thing is we need to approve our annual insurance. We've got basically three policies: an aviation policy, a directors and officers liability policy, and property and casualty insurance. They basically, we do it with John Robinson Associates agency here in Fairhope. For the second year in a row, I shopped it out to two other agencies, and John Robinson came in the best. The total is about $34,000, and I'd like for a motion and approval to bond this insurance in the next week or so.
I'll make a motion that we bond our insurance.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of bonding the insurance?
Joe, is that for all three of those?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Property and casualty stayed the same. Directors and officers liability went up about $1,500, and the general aviation actually went down about $1,200.
Okay.
We have $4 million of directors and officers liability. Okay, so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Thank y'all. The next housekeeping item is a discussion approval of the renewal of the lease renewal for the public safety hangar. This was a carryover item from last month. My recommendation is that we renew the lease, or that we give the chairman the ability to negotiate with ALEA to renew the lease and basically move this thing forward. There's been lots of discussion over the last 45 days about what we should do. I think we should just get a fair value for the lease in the $1,500 to $1,600 a month range, which doubles our value now, and consider these guys good tenants. But I'll open the floor for discussion.
Could you recap the research that you did about the rates and so forth?
I did. I don't have them with me, but what I did is I got the rates here and the rates at Gulf Shores. And for estimating the size airplanes we could, would fit in the airplane, the revenue they would bring in. And I think it ran from $1,375 to about $1,900, depending. And Vince got the ones for both airports in Mobile.
I got Brooklyn and Mobile Regional, average price $172, $182, which is basically what you could get the most airplanes of, and there was $350 a month.
So, we've not entered into real negotiations with them, but I think we could get $1,500 a month, which again is 112% of what we're getting now.
Well, one thing we weren't completely aware of, they do provide a service to the community.
A tremendous service.
Y'all, anything y'all want to say?
No, I mean, we tried to be good tenants there. I hate that we ended up with this mess where the lease actually expired. From what I understand, some of that is on us, maybe a little bit was on the city. It's our understanding we're trying to get everything done. I mean, when invoices are being sent now, they're being paid.
That's exactly right.
I mean, we want to stay where we're at. I mean, we enjoy being here. It's a great place to be. Unfortunately, something to consider, if we don't get the lease renewed, they are most likely going to pull the aircraft. We'll go back to Montgomery. Which doesn't sound like a big deal. Like Mr. Hicks brought up during your last meeting, we have to provide a service to the community. There's no way around that. We're going to do it one way or the other. But what you got to look at, if we're based here in Fairhope, at night, probably a 30-minute response time. During the day, you're talking about a 10-minute response time. If we go to Montgomery, you're looking at 2.5-hour response time. If you take somebody's child that's missing in the wintertime, hypothermia, you're talking about minutes. It means the difference between life or death. So it is a benefit for us to be here right in your back door. And like I said, we want to be good tenants and do what we can to stay. And like I said, we hate that it's gotten to this point to where, the lease actually expired and it's in the mess that it is now.
We're going to work to get it out. So, all right, I'd like a motion, and we'll see where we need to go.
I'll make
Anyone else have any questions?
Does anybody have any more questions?
How many jobs associated with that hangar?
It's 3 right now. Mr. Rowland just retired, but we're in the process of finding somebody to replace him.
So 4 jobs.
So you'd be looking at 4 jobs. And if, plan is to grow it from there. You know, hopefully put on an extra TFO, which is a tactical flight officer, which, you know, they're involved with, you know, operation of the FLIR camera and any type of rescue stuff that would be done.
You know, it doesn't hurt to have a law enforcement presence on the airport either, just kind of an added benefit.
And from the airport standpoint, we get credit for all 17 state-based planes, even though some in Coleman, some in Montgomery, in our FAA account. So that helps us with our grant procurement, and, you know, anyway. That's all I'm gonna say. Ray?
Yeah, and gentlemen, thank you guys, and there's not anyone here that appreciates what you do more than I do. I want you to understand, and I hope it was clear, that my questioning about it is strictly just in my objective role as a member of the airport authority. You're there, I know you're there, I like y'all, and I mean, that doesn't go anywhere beyond this, but I also know the scrutiny that, you know, kind of our stewardship of the city's dollars and resources has been under in the past year, and I think the exercise that we've been through to justify the decision that we're looking to come to was worth the time we put into it. So anyway, I do want to tell you guys
Very thoughtful.
where I was coming from, but I think we've answered a lot of questions in the intervening time that weren't quite out there last week.
I think it was a good exercise, not only for the airport authority, but for your organization as well.
Yeah,
As
we
you
do.
said, you don't want to be in this situation. And so
No.
going forward, you know, putting in those procedures so that this does not happen again.
Exactly, and, you know, like I said, I can't make excuses for what's going on in Montgomery, but the state's implemented a new accounting system, it's called STARS, and it's been a total nightmare, not only for leases, but for, I mean, trying to buy something at the auto parts store, it's absolutely ridiculous. To be honest with you, it's a wonder the state is even in existence.
And one thing, since we do have federal funding, we have to get fair market value for the hangar.
Yes.
We do.
can't,
And
yeah.
that was worth the exercise.
Yeah, worth the exercise to come up
Yes.
with a value.
Let me echo what Ray said and then ask a couple questions. We talked about that with the state could only do a 10-year lease, is that correct? Or can they do longer leases? I personally had a 15-year lease with 2 5-year options in a building I sold last year.
Well, I don't know, I mean, what I would like to do is, it's to our benefit to keep the leases short. They proposed a 7-year lease, they proposed a 7-year lease. And I said, let's, you know, this is a lot of work to renew it, let's do it 10 years, and, you know, and we can have a cost of living increase after every 2 years. But I mean, you know, I mean, they wanted they can only, I don't know what they can do. But there is that clause that you said that says at any point in time they don't get appropriation, they can cancel the lease. So, I mean, that is in there. But, I mean,
I give 90 days notice as of September 30th, I think, to cancel their lease each year. And then get out, no penalty.
But I mean, we can negotiate whatever we feel like is in the best interest of the airport authority as far as the term. I was thinking 10 years with a 5% increase after 5 years. So we don't have to touch it, you know, so we just.
The only reason I was asking, 10 years is good. We might get 20 with an RFP, or 25,
Yeah.
or 30. Who knows at what price?
Yeah.
And it won't have an exit clause every year. So those are all negatives, which to me, if we're going to do that, it would be worth a little bit more money than it would on an RFP to a private individual instead of a state organization, because they have the right to walk away for 12 months.
Okay.
Just my 2 cents.
Okay.
And I don't know you guys,
The
but I like
commission
you,
is for
appreciate what
you
you
to
do very much.
negotiate, but
What are the-
what about the authority saying their feelings in terms of 7-year lease, 10-year lease, et cetera?
Why don't we let Chip and I negotiate the lease with the idea that we'll bring it back to final approval before we consummate it?
I agree, but I do want someone that, I think that people that do leases a lot need to have some input, because I think there's it's like a landlord is typically benefited in a different time span than the tenant on a building like this, and I think
Yes.
we're missing that, so. Josh probably could walk you right there without any involvement from me, so.
Possibly, but also keep in mind that I can circulate a draft, and I, as the attorney, can receive input from the board members, if it's directly to me and to me only. So keep that in mind as well.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
There's already one on the
Should
table.
make one, I believe.
I
That
started
was-
to. I make a motion that we proceed to negotiate with the state to renew the lease on the hangar.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor of moving forward with the lease or negotiate with the state, everybody saying aye?
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'm gonna stay on the fence and not vote.
So I assume the ayes have it,
They
is that
do.
right? Will, Chip, and the gentleman, and Pam and Joe, so we had 4-2, right?
And one.
Did you?
I voted for him.
He voted for it.
So 5-1, okay, so it did pass, okay?
But it's gonna be.
It's an
broken out.
abstention, not 5-1, so. 4-0-1 abstention.
4-0, yeah. Okay, so what we'll do is, we've got a copy of their lease now, we're trying to make, they're gonna want their form of the lease. We'll negotiate the actual 3 or 4 terms that we can, and we'll bring it back for final approval. Okay? Thank y'all.
I do have something I want to bring up before we go into
Yes, sir.
executive session. I was wrong when I got the price on that pod sweep. That's $4,500. That was an old brochure that Joe Baggett had sent me. The total price is $6,530 delivered. So we had agreed on 5. So I've talked to, they have one up at the Coleman Airport. You know, there are 3 sections, 8 foot. They just have one 8-foot section, and that's very adequate for them to do their whole airport.
How much is that check you got over?
That's just a mistake. So is so we need to increase what we allocated from 5,000 to 6,500?
6530, $6,530 delivered. Tax tag title, I'm pretty sure.
What's your pleasure? What do y'all want to do on that?
I'll make a motion, we increase that.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor of going forward with the $6,530 fine, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
That's a good fix to that whole situation.
We'll hold that out of Chip's monthly airport
Yeah,
check.
and we'll take that out of your salary. Okay, now I think, Josh, why don't you take over and tell us kind of what our next step is?
Well, it's just procedurally, so the agenda item is number 3, economic development of the airport and potential land sales. Those two things, for those two things, this board has the ability to go into executive session to discuss both of them. And the code sections are cited right there in the meeting agenda. Before that can happen, there has to be a declaration entered on the minutes of somebody with knowledge that these particular sections of the state code apply to the executive session that we are going into. And so that, and in speaking with Lee, he has knowledge and he can make the declaration that this will apply to the executive session. So if that is done, then I will be satisfied as board attorney that the executive session would be proper. Now, in terms of who can go into executive session, it is only the members of the legislative organization or body that can go into executive session unless the members of that body vote to specifically include additional persons or special invitees, if you will, then those persons can also go into executive session with the legislative body. So but it needs to be set forth in the motion who will be going into executive session if it is anybody in addition to the members of the board.
So the
Okay.
person with the knowledge needs to make the motion and needs to include the special representative?
The person with knowledge needs to make the declaration.
Okay.
Okay,
And
I
then-
have knowledge, so I can make the motion that we go into executive session and it's
That
covered by
these
that.
terms are met.
That these terms are met.
But I
And
think
that
that
he's
Lee has a
included.
declaration, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken, that it will apply.
Okay, go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, Lee Lawson, President and CEO of the Baldwin County Economic Development Alliance. I make a declaration that I've been in discussions or preliminary negotiations involving matters of trade or commerce in which the Fairhope Airport Authority is in competition with private individuals or entities or other governmental bodies to discuss matters or information of the character defined or described in the Alabama Trade Secrets Act. I have direct personal knowledge that the recruitment or retention effort would be detrimentally affected if these parameters are disclosed outside of an executive session.
Okay. Well, then I think that
That is sufficient
sufficient to go into.
to bring into play those code sections from the executive session. So then, the next thing would need to be a motion voted on by the board to go into executive session that would include any persons that the board, if anybody that the board wants to go, that the board would like to have go into executive session with them.
Okay, and I don't know how to do this, but I would think, obviously, we would like to leave, well, I'd like, why don't you have a motion or talk through who you think should go into executive session with us, Josh?
Well, Lee is the one who is bringing this to the board for discussion.
Yes.
So he necessarily needs to be included in the executive session.
I make a motion,
We
based
also-
on those parameters, we go into executive session, we ask Mr. Lawson to come into the meeting also.
I second.
What about the other two non-legislative members of the body that are in here? Are you precluded from being in without being invited in, or?
I also need to be invited. I'm not a member of the board, and
I'll amend
we-
that motion that Josh is also invited to that meeting.
And we do also, just to add to that, we also have representatives of the city that are here as well that may need to be included in the discussion.
I don't think at this time, I think the board needs to be fully informed of what the opportunity is, and at this point, I would limit it to Lee Lawson and yourself.
And that would be my motion.
I'll second it. I would have, okay, well, yeah, okay. Then that's the way we'll have it then. So, all those in favor of including Lee Lawson and Josh as part of the executive session, that's all, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. We're now in executive session. 5:10, and I recognize that we've come back from executive session. And Josh, will you call us back?
We just need a motion to resume the regular meeting.
I make a motion to resume the regular
I
meeting.
second.
Okay, all those in favor of resuming the meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the meeting is resumed. Now we need a motion to, I guess, move our Blue Marlin project forward. Lee?
I don't think I can make a
Well,
motion.
he can't
Not
make the
officially.
motion,
Oh, I can't remember.
but I'll make a motion to
Okay.
move the Blue Marlin forward in the context and terms that Mr. Lawson is going to describe right now.
Yeah, so our request is that the airport authority would appoint a couple members to negotiate alongside the Baldwin County Economic Development Alliance to negotiate with principals of Project Blue Marlin, their site consultants, their developers, for a location at the Fairhope Airport.
Okay. Do I have a second of that motion? Have a second of that motion?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor of that
I
motion?
think,
can't
John,
make the
look,
motion.
discussion, Josh.
Should we identify the members of the board who will lead that
Y'all
charge?
need
That can be a second motion.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. If there's a second motion to identify the members of the board that'll work with Lee to go forward with Blue Marlin. Those members are Joe McInerney and Vince Booth. Do I have a motion to signify to approve that motion?
Or make that motion.
Or do I have a?
That is the motion.
That is the motion.
I made the motion.
So you made the motion.
I made the motion.
All
And
right.
then I second the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any other business that needs to come before the board tonight?
I will say one quick thing. We had another site visit by another company this past week. We had a maintenance, repair, and overhaul defense company in on Friday of this past week. Looked at a couple other sites in Baldwin County, but had a great visit here at the Fairhope Airport. Looking at about a 20,000 square foot facility. Need hangars to work on Black Hawk helicopters, and they do DoD work. Their company's grown. They've doubled every year for the last 4 years. A company out of Virginia. We showed them a couple sites, and they looked at the east side, of course, where you'll be extending. They need runway access to work on the roto wing helicopters that they do for the Department of Defense. Extensive work at Fort Rucker and some other DoD installations. So we had a great visit. Joe did a good job representing the airport there. They were impressed with the academy and with all the development that the airport has done. So we'll also be back in touch with you on that project and their decision.
About
moving forward.
25 jobs.
Yep, 25 jobs. Like I said, the company's been growing their work with the Department of Defense. So another good prospect.
Thank you, Lee. Thank
Yep.
you for setting that up.
We appreciate your work.
Thank y'all.
Yes.
Look
Thank
forward to
you.
working with you.
Some of that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so without any further ado, I'd like to get a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
A second. Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor of adjourning the meeting? Thank y'all for your heavy